Welcome into the Illini Inquirer Podcast. It's Jeremy Werner and Joey Wagner, and let's do our six-pack of Illinois questions leading into a date with number one, Oregon. Illinois heading on the road to number one, Oregon. Thought when Illinois got the schedule, Joey, that this would be the toughest test. Not that Penn State or Michigan would not be, or that Nebraska even would not be, but this is a team with national championship aspirations, and right now they're number one. They beat Ohio State a couple weeks ago, but don't you know, Illinois is number 20 here. So we set up another top 20 matchup. Here we go, Joey. Everything to gain, nothing to lose for Illinois.
I just want to, I was thinking about this before we jumped on. I just want to point out how different, kind of like what we thought this game could have been. I probably said the same against Michigan last week, but this was supposed to be hey, if you can get through this stretch and if you can be 4 wins would be great. 3 wins would be really putting yourself in a position to get bowl eligible. We thought all right, just get out of Oregon with a chance to get 3 more down the stretch in the month of November. And it's totally changed, right? I mean, Illinois bowl eligibility is a footnote that we haven't really talked about because it's not really the biggest deal right now. It's fun to think back a little bit to August and how everything has changed in front of us with this Illinois football team. And I know we're going to get into the impacts of that here in a second, Jeremy, but what a difference. This is not the tone I thought we would be taking going in, where it's yes, this is your second house money game of the year, whatever, right? You should stay in the rankings one way or the other. And you have a chance to really do something.
Yeah, I think your expectations maybe from the preseason have gone to, hey, maybe we can give them a scare from what was, that's probably a loss and probably not all that closer one. And it still could end up that way because Oregon is that good. But Oregon's closed practice when they normally don't close practice leading into this game. So I think that tells you they're like, hey, we got to take this team seriously. And so you're right, though. Coming into this game, you felt if Illinois came out of Oregon 4-4, they were in a great spot. Well, they're 6-1, and they got a chance to be 6-2 or 7-1 after all of this. So it is pretty amazing. The door is open for a lot of big things, whether that's the Citrus Bowl or whether that's the Music City Bowl or whether that's a college football playoff on the other side of this. They have a chance to do some really good things, and the margins have been close. I want to remind people of that. I mean, you beat Purdue by 1 point in overtime. You beat Nebraska in overtime. You beat Kansas by 6, but you won. You won those games, and you've deserved this opportunity in front of CBS cameras yet again, Joey, at 2:30 with a number one opportunity.
Yeah, I lost my complete train of thought, but it's a huge opportunity. Again, it doesn't matter. It doesn't. A house money game, I said this on the post-game pod, it's not a house money game where the outcome changes from 4-8 to 5-7 or 3-9 to 4-8. It truly isn't a big deal. And you either way, as long as they were to be Minnesota following Oregon, you're probably going to find yourself in the top 25 of that college football playoff rankings. And you've got a chance to really do something, right? I don't know how great of a chance that is. I would imagine if they do something, Willard is going to be packed at whatever hour that airplane lands back in Champaign.
It's called Derek Piper to get there.
Late Sunday night, early Sunday morning. But you can just feel people care again. People have a hope again, and people aren't fretting. They're fretting in the sense that it's Oregon, but there's still so much left on the table for this Illinois team. And if you go into your second bye with 2 losses, and that's to a team in Oregon and Penn State, and those teams that are probably going to be in the top 3 of the college football playoff rankings, definitely top 5, both on the road, you'll take that, right? If you're a fan, you will take that 1,000 times over.
All right, we're going to dive into this game in our 6-pack of questions. We're going to have a pick to click, and Joey wants to add a bold prediction because he's got one on his mind. They're texting about, so we'll get to all of that here coming up. But first 3 questions are going to focus a little bit on what has just happened after that landmark victory. Because Joey and I, we had a post-game pod, but things have happened since then. We've talked to people, and obviously there's been some recruiting stuff as well. So we're going to start with recruiting. Question number 1, Joey, what has been the recruiting impact of a 6-1 start?
I've said this before. I don't think that one win, it's like the Michigan win. Let's just take that. And they had a ton of really talented prospects. One win on its own probably doesn't change a prospect's mind. I don't think we're going to get on the phone with the kid who committed. Say, I'll tell you what, they beat Michigan and I was sold. That was the one for me. But you're really seeing Brett Bielema's vision for this come to fruition for a second time in 3 years, I think that the way people look at Illinois,
culmination of this. It's the
yeah,
culmination of Kansas plus Nebraska
that's right.
plus Michigan, right? Like
It's a perception change. That's what it like. The perception of your program is changing in the sense of like, hey, this can be done here. Like, yes, there's still history at Illinois to fight uphill, especially as we've mentioned time and again for in-staters who have really only known Illinois to be terrible. So like, there's a history to fight there, but now you've just got this like this. Brett Bielema can say last year is a one-off. Like, don't sweat that. That was not who we are. Look at what we've done in 2022 and 2024. People just look at you differently. We talked to recruits from Georgia, from Texas, who came up. Those are on the website as a small little tease, Jeremy. Like, they're here for this because they wanted to see what this was all about. And that if you're 2-4, you're probably not getting that. And then you put on top of it the atmosphere you have to sell when you've got had 2 sellouts this season and both on hand for both those sellouts. J.C. Anderson, Max Suter, 2 4-star tight ends. Like, it's just kind of all coming together for Illinois.
Yeah, I want to give you a quote because I do think this is the biggest for 26 and 27, right? Those kids, because now they've seen Illinois good 2 out of 3 years, and they're seeing these sellout crowds, and they're like, hey, Illinois is a good option. But I want to give you a quote from Joey Wagner's cousin, not really his cousin, Cameron Wagner.
Cousin
I asked him about
man.
4-star 2027. So just a sophomore out of St. Joe Ogden, right in the backyard. His parents went to Indiana. His dad was a football player at Indiana. His mom threw the discus there. But I asked him about the 6-1 start, and he said, it's surprising, honestly. I mean, they haven't been the greatest program, but now they're turning around, and I'm just excited to watch them. It's really cool to go from a time people used to say, oh, Illinois, not that great of a program. But now you get an offer from Illinois. It's, hey, that's pretty sweet. That's it. Like that's what it is all of a sudden, oh, that's kind of cool again. And I do think 2026, 27, that's where you really get the traction. I think in the transfer portal, when you develop guys, you win games. And of course, we'll get into the NIL conversation. That helps. But even in 2025, we just saw Logan Farrell flip his commitment from North Carolina, which is struggling right now. He was committed there for almost a year, and he went there, and it was bad vibes. They've lost 4 straight games, all ACC games, the last 3 games. And Mac Brown, there's questions about how long he'll be there. Well, Brett Bielema is 6-1, the model of stability here in state, and they seem like the arrow is rising. So he's looking for a better option, and Illinois was one of his top 3 options the entire way. Illinois kept touch with him, and now they have a really talented in-state tight end who is now committed to them after he flips. And he reminds me of like a more athletic Tanner Arkin, but even immediately, Joey, a 6-1 start gets you back in the conversation. Just like last 2 years ago, when a 7-1 start, Wisconsin fires their coach, Colin Dixon comes back to Illinois and commits to them. So it can have an immediate impact. And some of these programs that might be struggling might have a coaching change. Illinois can take advantage of that as they have with Logan Farrell in North Carolina here.
Yeah, you could even throw Malik Elsie into that conversation a couple of years ago. You know, you can almost envision conversations. I know you and I believe in this coaching staff. Like, we think it's a good coaching staff at Illinois. And you go back to those earlier classes. And, you know, if you were like kind of grade things out, it's like A on the relationships, right? Like we know that they built strong relationships with some of those early kids that they didn't get. A on rolling out the red carpet for official visits. They had NFL success that they could pitch to these guys. But at the end of the day, it came down, you know, you could imagine a conversation going, Coach, hey, I love you, but, you know, I then pick winning school on the other side of things.
Yeah,
that's right. And not to say those schools aren't viable options now, but so are you. So now you pair those relationships that you've built the way that you feel like you can really roll out the red carpet when kids get to campus with that NFL pitch, which has gotten better over the last couple of years, with the fact that you're winning. And all of a sudden, like, yeah, maybe there's some history to fight against, but you're right now is a heck of a lot more attractive than it's been at any point in time in Brett Bielema's tenure. 2022 would really put it into conversation there. And now it's kind of maybe making it harder for kids to say no just because of, well, hey, man, I'm trying to get to the bowl games. Or I'm trying to get to winning a league championship. Now you can really sell yourself as a team that, like, those those things can happen here. And you've got a few wins now on the football field to show for that.
Yeah. And again, I want to say, I think the transfer portal make a big impact. Maybe you get a couple more flips in 2025, but 26, 27, I think that's when you're really going to see it, because these kids now know Illinois as a good Big Ten program. And that's key. But Brett Bielema said something after the game where he said, we have to capitalize on this in recruiting. And I totally agree. So I followed up on Monday about, well, how does that look? Like, how do you do that? And he gave a really interesting answer, Joey. So let's play that.
To be honest, right, NIL is a donor-driven business, right? Like, and you got to have the, that bank account has to match what you can give out, right? And I haven't held back, right? 2 years ago or last year, we were in what I've been told, the lowest NIL budget in the entire conference, and in my opinion, we underperformed in a season that was frustrating, right? This year we're I think somewhere in the right about the 12th, 13th spot, right? So we're not quite midway. We're about a third of the way up. So we're in the top part of the bottom third. So I'm not saying that's where we want to live, but if we can start getting ourselves in a position just to be in the top half, right, and be in that moment, I'm excited about what I can do, and that's why I keep telling Josh and administration, like, if you just give us the opportunity, right, like, I think some really good things can happen. I think what's great is when we got here, I partnered with Brad right away. Like, he was a guy that we knew commonly, and I know where they stand in the NIL world in basketball, and they've been rewarded very well because of it. If we can get in that moment, I think that football can sustain that. Fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, recruiting sometimes now isn't really recruiting. It's budgeting, right? And I think we can do that very effectively, but we just got to make sure we have the right type of budget.
That was awesome. Like, you don't hear a lot of coaches talking outwardly about this. So there was so much there about where Illinois was probably 2 years ago, where they are now. And you and I have talked about it. They have improved themselves where they can go out and get guys like, I know he's not starting yet, but Terrence Brooks, JC Davis, Zachary Franklin. They can keep guys like Gabe Backus and Pat Bryan and Luke Altmaier who have interest from elsewhere. And I think Bielema later in the press conference said, 6 or 7 of his guys got offered double or triple what Illinois gave them, but they believe in the development here. So there's just a lot of stuff there that was finally like, yeah, finally somebody's talking about this. But it is amazing. Like, Illinois right now, if they're 12th or 13th in NIL and they're having the success, what could they do if they have a great season and NIL is boosted, revenue sharing is boosted? What can they do talent-wise? Because obviously to compete with the team you're playing this weekend, to compete with the Penn States of the world, you're going to have to keep up in this talent.
Yeah, surprisingly enough, people with disposable income are more likely to give that income when they feel like it's helping their favorite team win. Yeah. And it's just the truth. And you get in the cat and mouse game. You need good players to win. Well, you got to win to get good players. And how do you find your way kind of out of that and get to a level that maybe you can hit both of those things? I think you're seeing that as part of the building process, and it's not just roster building; it's building to build your roster in terms of the NIL war chest. But I was glad to hear Brett Bielema say that, because it's kind of the underlying thing with all of this is that, and it's not just acquisition of talent. It's not, and I think if you and I had to probably rank how NIL money is divvied out, at least through our conversations, it'd be like 1, retention, 2, portal, 3, high school is how Illinois uses that money. So this isn't just, hey, everybody, we'll take all your pennies and nickels and we'll combine that for a good fund, and we're going to go get X player out of the portal or X, 4 or 5-star. Some of that, and I'm not trying to sound any alarms, it's just the way football goes, is you got to retain guys. Like that, there's a retention element to this thing as well.
And I will scream from the mountaintops all the time about this, Joey, because I know getting the Terrence Brooks of the world wins the offseason, right? But you know what wins the offseason for Illinois is keeping Pat Bryan here, because other schools wanted that guy. You know what won in the offseason a couple years ago? Keeping Johnny Newton here and Gabe Backus here. Like, those guys are so important. And you think ahead to this offseason, I think Luke Altmaier is going to have success here, and I think he'd like to stay here. But you got to make it competitive, right? And you got to keep that guy. If you retain him, you're able to retain Gabe Backus if he wants to come back for another year and improve his draft stock. If you can retain Melvin Priestley and all these guys, maybe Xavier Scott, think about what that does for your team to get these returners back who have meant so much to you, and then to go in the portal with some money as well, and find some guys who fill the defensive line, who fill the offensive tackle spot, who maybe go get a wide receiver. Retention is incredibly important. Just look at Purdue and how much that has hurt them.
Yeah, and again, we've said this 1,000 times. I'm going to scream this. Any conversation, I'm glad Brett Bielema said it because it could finally put it into the most annoying conversation about Illinois and NIL, that they were broke. There was like a 30 for 30 broke. That Illinois got nothing, and it's just begging people for goodwill to come to Illinois. That was
or unwilling to.
Yes, it was bad then, and it's bad now. The money was there. You saw that in the spring pick up. Obviously, it can be better. Brett Bielema said that. It had to. They were. I'll take him at his word that they were near the bottom of the Big Ten a few years ago and have climbed up. But too many conversations like, oh boy, well, it's transfer portal season. Good luck not getting any. That's just not how it's been. And commitments have bore that out. That's not how it goes. And that's why the spring, when you start getting the guys that you got, I really even go back to the winter with J.C. Davis, Melvin Priestley, Dennis Briggs. It's like, hey, this isn't a program that's broke, but and again, that's the other side of that's not saying like, hey, don't sweat it. They'll get got. No, there always needs to be more. That's college athletics right now. Like there always has got to be more, but it's not a rich beyond belief or poor beyond belief. And those are the only two ways it can be. There's a middle ground there. And I think Illinois has been in that middle ground for longer than it's gotten credit for being there.
Well, what Illinois has had to do, especially the last year or so, is they got to hit when they spend on it, right? Like they can't just go, I know people want the 5-star prep prospect. Illinois would rather get a J.C. Davis. Illinois would rather get a Dennis Briggs Jr. than 5-star who's going to cost you $300,000, $400,000 and might be good in 2 or 3 years. Like you need somebody that can help you now. And they've had to be smart. They've had to moneyball this a little bit more than some of those Miamis of the world, right? Maybe the Oregons even of the world. So I love that he said it. And he's basically saying, yeah, we can sell this, we can do it, but hey, recruiting, that's part of it, but you got to have the budget to get these players too. So I was happy he finally said it, and because now the fans know it, and now we can talk, like we can say that, hey, Brett Bielema is saying this. It comes with a lot of weight.
And he's also, what I kind of took for this as a secondary thing, which the first primary is, hey, please money, really need some money. But the secondary is, hey, I believe in who we have on staff, that if you start giving money to meet what we're able to evaluate and how we're able to develop, then you're going to really get something like that's going to keep this thing moving forward. So it wasn't just, hey, trust, we'll go get the best 4 or 5 stars. We're going to get the right guys who come in here and fit what we're doing, and we'll be able to develop some of the warts that they may have because they're in the portal. We'll be able to work those out of them and help elevate win. So I did think it was twofold, but primarily it was, please call your local icon agent today.
All right, number 2. You like that? Man, I loved Aaron Henry doing that about the response, bringing out Kirk Cousins. What in hindsight was your favorite part of the Illini's win over Michigan, Joey?
Aaron Henry on Monday. I'll get to a real answer. I loved it. Like, I know some some media types get like, oh, really? You're going to, dude, yeah, that's fine. If we're going to sit on here every week for 45 minutes and then again post-game and be critical of what's happened or what we think happened, freaking be critical of us.
Which was fair.
Yeah, it was. I'm not.
It was fair.
Yeah, and they know that, but dude, that's fine. Be critical of us too. That's part of it. It's like you're critical. I have no issues there. I think it was a way, in a more serious note, Jeremy, it was a way that Illinois won. It didn't feel like it was really controlled throughout the entire game. I almost said domination. I wanted to back off of that a little bit, but they won in the trenches, which has not been how Illinois has won football games to this point. You could point to Nebraska and say that's probably the closest other game that they won in the trenches, but they won in the trenches in a game that they were not expected to. And it wasn't Luke Altmaier going on an Indiana, John Paddock, Indiana like heater, or really even Northwestern like heater. I know that wasn't a win, but John Paddock had a pretty good game in that game. This was a sustained, controlled, in the trenches. It is repeatable. Like that's what I come back to. That's the word I come back to. That was a repeatable game if Illinois plays like it's capable of playing. You can't always repeat 400-yard passing days, but you can repeat what Illinois did against Michigan. Not saying they will against Oregon, but that method can happen time and again.
Yeah, for me specifically, Joey, it's their ability to run the football against Michigan. I thought the offensive line had by far its best game. Not only in pass protection. I mean, Illinois only had one sack they allowed, and that wasn't even on the offensive line if you look at it. But Mason Graham had his moments, but I thought Kenneth Grant didn't really do much in that game. Josiah Stewart, who was leading the Big Ten in sacks, didn't do much in that game. And I thought you just held your own and at times really succeeded. Josh Kreutz and Josh Geske are probably playing their best ball. I think J.C. Davis and Melvin Priestley almost quietly now are having like good seasons. And if they can figure out that right guard spot, you're seeing some flashes. Like some of the flashes I'm seeing from Brandon Henderson are exciting. He is a little bit inconsistent as a first-time starter. This will probably just be his third time. But if you can run the football and open things up for the passing game, it just makes things so much easier for Luke Altmaier if you're playing in front of the sticks. Because what got you in trouble against Penn State, and maybe it happens again against Oregon, but it's when you're 3rd and long and those guys can just pin their ears back. If you're 3rd and 2, they're in conflict. They don't know what's coming. And Luke Altmaier can run. And I think his legs have been huge for this rushing attack without Caden Fagan. So the fact that you're able to run the football effectively, I thought it was schemed up well by Barry Lundy Jr., but it was blocked well as well. So if they can continue that the rest of the year, I think they're really going to have a chance at 9 or 10 wins, which would be obviously huge for this program.
Yeah, 3rd and 2 for this offense must be a nightmare, if it's a little dramatic to say, for defenses. But when you factor in the way Luke Altmaier is operating in that RPO, suddenly there's 3 things that they can do at the snap of a finger. You can run or hit that quick to Zachary Franklin, Pat Bryant, or Luke Altmaier can take off. That is a tough spot to be in for defenses, with specifically the way that Luke Altmaier right now is playing. I know we think of quarterbacks, a lot of it is intermediate to long passes, but he can be really, really a problem in some of those short yardage stuff. And he's grown enough as a quarterback. There's value in just, hey, if it's 3rd and 2, 3's cool. 3 gets you to, the next one. And I'm not saying you didn't know that last year, but it's just more growth. It just feels like he's more comfortable in taking what's there, and his receivers are getting it done after the catch. If you can stay in that neighborhood, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, maybe even 3rd and 4, that's probably advantageous for the offense.
We don't talk about it enough, but he is in the conversation for the best running quarterback in the Big Ten. Like he's number 3 right now in scramble yards. And I think the guy that's number 1 is like 9 yards ahead of him. So that tells you he can make plays with his feet when he's dropping back to pass. But we've also seen these designed runs by Barry Lundy, like 4 or 5 a game. They're really getting some yards, the zone read option. He is one of the best running quarterbacks in the Big Ten right now. And that weapon is huge. And it's why you see Illinois and Barry Lundy recruiting Trey Petty and Carson Boyd and guys who can run with the ball in their hands, because you just have a numbers advantage, right? When you have a quarterback that can make plays and the defense has to account for it both. So I think that has shown up huge in the last 2 weeks. Think of Purdue with those 3 rushes on that one drive for 60-something yards and just getting 5 to 10 yards against Michigan last week. They just had no answer for it.
No, I'm with you. I was just trying to find out his scramble yards. But I like more and more, especially with Caden Fagan out, I wonder if you'll see more designed runs and not necessarily those scrambles. I thought the one they called against Purdue, the quarterback draw at a really critical time, that tells you a lot more about where Barry Lundy, he trusts Luke Altmaier's legs, and that was a telling moment. So yeah, he's in that conversation.
Let me give it to you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Last year he led the Big Ten in scramble yards, 267. He's currently 3rd with 142. UCLA's Ethan Garbers has 161. Jack Lausch, she's probably the best athlete. He's obviously not as great of a passer as Altmaier. 143 scramble yards for him. So, and then the last 2 weeks, you take out sacks, which they should. Luke Altmaier the last 2 weeks, 15 carries, 149 yards, 2 touchdowns. Pretty good.
That'll play.
All right, number 3, Gabe Akis, Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week, had a breakout game, 13 tackles, 2.5 sacks, and a forced fumble, Joey. Kind of putting himself in the NFL draft conversation, as Brett Bielema thought he would going into this year. Now tied for 2nd in the Big Ten, I believe, in sacks with 5.5. He leads the Big Ten in 3 forced fumbles. It's kind of That game gave me some Whitney Merciless 2011 vibes when led the country in sacks and forced fumbles. But who is Illini's best 2025 NFL draft prospect? Now that we can add maybe Gabe Akis in this mixture.
I've got two, so I want you to start, and I'll take the, because I think we probably have the same two guys.
I think this guy's going to do really well in pre-draft, and not even as much athletically, but I think the tape is going to look phenomenal. I think the interviews are going to go really, really well. I think the floor for him is incredibly high. I'm going Pat Bryant. I think he should be like a 3rd round pick, maybe a 4th at worst. So I just feel like Seth Coleman, his ceiling might be higher. JC Davis, I think, is going to get drafted. Gabe Akis is really interesting if he can continue this, Joe, and maybe he rises up. But I just love what Pat Bryant is, and I think NFL teams are going to love what Pat Bryant is. If they like Washington for a 6th round pick, I think Pat's going to be much higher than that.
Yeah, he was my number 1. And I think he's a guy, you know how 40s go when they train in the offseason. Like, you spend months to train for a 40. I mean, you can catch the ball in your sleep. You're training to run. And I think Pat's the guy who's going to probably have a faster time than you think, than you might think going into it.
What did Casey run at the pro day? Was it 4.4? Like, if Pat's at 4.5, I'd feel pretty dang good about it. I think Casey ran a sub 4.5. Maybe it was right around there, but I think if Pat runs close to that, he's going to help himself.
Yeah, I would agree there. I think I'm torn between one of the two outside linebackers. Seth Coleman has been really disruptive, and I know, and I'll have it in the notebook here. I know you talked to Clint Sinham. He's probably playing as good as anyone, but the sack stats don't show that right now. And I get it. And I do think there's a lot of value to pressures, but you do have to get home. Yeah. You've got to turn those pressures into sacks. So I knew, I'll tell you, I know last offseason there was a lot of interest in Seth Coleman, and there were some teams, from what I heard, that had high grades on him. And in kind of talking around, it's like you understood why, but then the question of consistency came up, and I feel like he's leveled out the consistency this year. There aren't games where it's like, where's Seth Coleman? He just hasn't had that Maryland game yet. Yeah. Where he just puts 1,000 of them together and goes.
Sinton thinks it's coming. He thinks it's coming.
And maybe it comes because Gabe Akis on the other end gets a little bit more attention and gives Seth Coleman some more opportunities. And I like his length. I just feel like Gabe Akis is a guy, and maybe this is recency bias. It may well be, and I'll wear that if it is. But that versatility to move down the line a little bit, and you're seeing him play better, not just as a straight-up pass rusher. He's showing more to his game at outside linebacker than just being a really, really strong guy barreling through everyone in his way. I've stopped at 2013. So all of this season and last season, and it's not quite apples to apples because there's different tackles at Michigan. He had 7 pressures against Michigan, according to PFF. That is the most since at least the start of last season when I stopped to go to media today. That's absurd. And it's still Michigan, even if they don't have the high-end tackle talent. Like, that is, in a Big Ten game against, especially factoring in the postseason run last year and the edge rushers Michigan saw, that's absurd. I just think if he starts to really figure it out, I like where he can go. And obviously Illinois did too with that plan. The question is, can you keep him out of the 2025 NFL draft?
Yeah, I don't know if it comes down to a simple number, but if he gets to 9 or 10 sacks, I don't know if you can, right? And I think we would be having a different conversation if he can have more production like this. I don't want to overlook Seth Coleman, though, just because he's long, he can bend, he's really athletic, he can drop into cover. I think he's actually been pretty good in coverage when he drops in there. So I do think those guys. I think JC Davis is a very draftable guy, probably day 3 pick.
Probably a guard.
Yeah, probably a guard. That's what keeps me from going higher with him. By the way, Casey Washington 4.46 at the pro day, fast track at Illinois. So that's good, though, that we're talking about a guy who could potentially be an early entry guy. The one thing I love about Gabe, man, he's really confident in himself. You can tell he's a team leader, Joey. And I think he's been pretty good this year, but you needed him to take over a game, and he certainly did that against Michigan.
Yeah, we talked about that a week ago on this very pod. Like who on that defensive front is going to take over, and it was Gabe Akis, and you sure as hell need him to try to do it again in Oregon, or maybe Seth Coleman can be that guy to step up. But that was, I'm glad Aaron Henry said it on Monday. Like, this is what we've expected of Gabe Akis since he got on campus. He was already a monster compared to every other freshman relative, and then really just looked like an older guy. So I wonder how that is. Is that like the really random massive game, or do you put in, can that kind of translate to, a sack at Oregon, a sack and a half against Minnesota, and then build that up throughout the rest of the year?
The guy, like, I feel like could be a late riser here and maybe be a surprise, not to the Tip Ryman level of surprise. I wonder if T-Ron Edwards gets a late call, given what he's done this year and given how Brett Bielema will certainly talk him up in the process.
Yeah, that's a good call, because that position has minimally gotten into camp. Yeah. He's a guy who's going to probably win interviews. So in his production, he was having a great game. Like, if we were talking star of the game and halfway through the third quarter early, it's like, oh, it's probably T-Ron. He's been really, really good. And then Gabe Akis just played at a level that we.
Yeah, and then I copped out and I just went offensive and defensive lines.
Yeah. Pick one. Neither was wrong. They weren't wrong. But T-Rod's a good. I'm trying to think of any other possible late, like.
Zakari is going to get a great chance.
Will be in that conversation.
I mean, we're talking about. I didn't come into the season thinking there could be 5 or 6 guys in that conversation. I think there's going to be.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, it's a good thing about your program. All right, let's focus on Illinois against number 1 Oregon. Kind of a big deal. Number 4, Joey. What gives you most concern about the matchup against number 1 Oregon? Got a lot of choices here.
Yeah, Oregon. The fact, like, it's a cop-out answer, and I'll get more serious in a second, but it's just talent. It's just a sheer insane amount of talent, and the way that talent is being utilized. It's one thing just to have guys who can play football, but Dan Lanning and that coaching staff are doing a really good job of getting everything out of them. If you look at offensively, I think Luke Altmaier's good enough that, like, he's going to give Illinois a chance to score the football at a decent clip. Is that 20, 21, 24 points? Like, Luke Altmaier can find himself. He's good enough to find himself in that conversation. But again, you think back to Michigan, like, stop Michigan's run, make them pass, and you're doing cartwheels on the sideline. If you can get them into 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, because you just don't have the confidence that Michigan's going to be able to pick that up through the air. Where do you find that confidence? If it's an observer, I'm sure they're going to find different nuggets of confidence throughout the course of the week in the game. The running game's really good. The quarterback's really good. The receivers are good. Like, it's just it's all over the field. And I don't know what you can zone in on and try to feel like, where we would watch and think, oh, that's a win for Illinois, right? Like, it was a win to make Michigan pass. I don't know what that answer is against Oregon.
Yeah. Here's the problem with the offense. They have so many guys. It's just, you can't shut down one guy and be like, yep, that's the key to their entire offense, right? Like, last week you looked at Michigan and you're sitting there going, man, if you can just slow down that running game and force them into 3rd and longs, Illinois is in a pretty good spot here. Well, if Oregon, doesn't throw the ball that well, they got a good offensive line and a really good running back in Jordan James, who I don't think is as good as Devin Neal or Nick Singleton, but he's kind of reminds me of Katron Allen. He's just powerful, probably got a little bit more speed than Katron, but he's one of the best backs in the Big Ten. So you got to deal with him, but you can't load the box like against Michigan because you got the most accurate quarterback in the country who's doing the best Bo Nix impression you can, and 3 wide receivers that are potentially going to play in the NFL, including Tez Johnson, who was unbelievable last year and leads the 2nd in the Big Ten in receptions, has great speed, under 4.4. Evan Stewart is just a freak, and he's starting to get consistent. 5-star kid, transfer from Texas A&M. That's kind of a bigger option. And then they got another kid who's really good, who's an Alabama transfer. So that's the problem, is they just can out-talent you, and they got so many answers that you got to play so disciplined, Joe. You got to be able to keep them in front of you and tackle well, because if you don't, if there's a missed assignment or there's a missed tackle, they're going to make you pay for it with an explosive play, because that's what this offense is capable of. And their quarterback doesn't miss very often, right? Like, he's got 4 picks. Like, he can be intercepted, but he's a 6th-year senior who just makes all the accurate throws and has kind of been a souped-up version of Luke Altmaier, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I would have liked to have been a fly on the wall in the house of Big Ten coaches when Dan Lanning and that system got that quarterback, Dylan Gabriel, out of the portal. It had to be like, are you kidding me right now? Like, really? This is just not a marriage you want to see if you're any other coach. And the Big Ten has played out in a really big way, and the offense has gotten a lot better as the season has gone on. There were some early games for Oregon where you're like, oh, all right, thought this would be a little different. And then they've really hit a gear that's been really, really impressive to watch. So, yeah, I'm with you. It's just there's so many different options for Oregon.
The other thing, like maybe you have a little bit more confidence after last week with what you were able to do with that Michigan defensive front, but Oregon might have more depth defensive line. I don't know if they have a Mason Graham. I don't think they do. But Derek Harmon, the Michigan State transfer, is playing as well as any defensive tackle in the Big Ten right now. Is 32 pressures already. Matayo Ugalele is a 5-star kid, sophomore, playing really, really well. The good news is they probably don't have Jordan Birch. Sounds like he's got a serious injury, and he's probably their best defender, former 5-star guy. But they got a lot of dudes on that defensive front. So if you aren't able to run the ball or you aren't able to do well on first and second down, this team can't get after you, Joey. And we know Luke Altmaier's got to play well, so they got to set himself up for some opportunities. But you need a strong performance from your offensive line.
Yeah, is this the game that we go back to the short passing game extension of the run? Because that didn't play out like we thought it would against Michigan. And do you try to do that, or do we go, I can't wait for this freaking bold prediction. Oh,
we're getting there. We're getting
almost spilled the beans.
Number 5, what gives you the most optimism about the Illini, Joey?
Yeah, I think it's the way they took the ball away against Michigan. It's more and more, it's very clear. Obviously, turnovers are emphasized by everybody, and they do. The stats out there about turnovers exist for a reason. They can change a game. But you just saw how much different things are when Illinois is getting 2 of those. They got 3 against Michigan, but even 2, you just put that offense in its position to have a short field at times and be able to flip a game really quickly. And you've got to, I think Illinois has got to try to duplicate that against Oregon and try to find a way to get 2, 3 if you can do it. I don't know that 3's probably in the cards. And it's probably going to be punching the ball away because, as you mentioned, Dylan Gabriel, accurate, protects the ball. That's going to be a tough task. But just the way they were able to do that, I think just they feed off of those. They've made that mayhem belt for a reason. And it's just a big spark for Illinois to try to do that. And to do it at the level they did was impressive.
Obviously, Gabriel's not going to have as many mistakes as Jack Tuttle in Michigan quarterback. But when they do, you need to take advantage of them. Like you can't have the ball hit your hands and not come away with it, right? Like against Purdue, right? Like those would have ended the game. You would have won by 2 touchdowns. You would have felt a heck of a lot better about that one. But what I loved about that performance was the punching the ball out. Like when they saw the ball, they hit ball. Matthew Bailey's was a thing of beauty. Gabe Akis was a thing of beauty. They're probably going to need 1 or 2 of those against this team because you got to steal possessions. Because if this is an equal possession game, Oregon's got a huge advantage, right? Or if Illinois turns it over, like that's just a huge advantage. This Oregon offense is one of the best in the country. The other thing that does give me some optimism, Oregon's got some talented defensive backs. So I don't want to act like they're not good because they are good. They're all like 5'9", 5'10" at corner. I kind of like that matchup for Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin. Colin Dixon's a bigger guy. Maybe he can break some tackles. So when we talk about it, and this is a team that's going to go zone a lot. I like, Luke Altmaier, a veteran, Pat Bryant, Zachary Franklin, finding the soft spots in the zone. So I do think you can have some passing success against this team as long as you can run the ball a little bit and stay ahead of the stick. So that's another reason for optimism is I think Illinois is still a passing team. Last week, I think was just a different game where you didn't have to do that. They're going to have to do that this week.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I don't want to say too much because number 6 is going to be a playoff of that for me.
All right, go ahead. Biggest key for the Illini to have a chance in the 4th quarter.
This is, we probably said this against Nebraska. I can't remember what we said 8 games into this. This is Luke Altmaier. His table is set to put himself in that conversation, to really establish himself more, probably a better way to put it, in that conversation with Dylan Gabriel. We're with the Big Ten's top quarterbacks. Go out there and show that you can go on the road at Oregon and move the football and put up points for your team. And I just, with the way the running game goes, Jeremy, as you mentioned, the smaller defensive backs, the key is for Luke Altmaier to have a Luke Altmaier moment against Oregon.
I got a dumb idea. You're going to hate it.
Yeah, probably.
Do you remember when they have the lovey beards in the student section. If Luke Altmaier leads Illinois to a huge win at Oregon, for the Minnesota game, they got to get Altmaier mullets, right? Like you got to find a way to get that done and get all the kids a mullet to wear.
So this might be like a new idea for you.
Yeah.
People can just cut their hair.
Well, I can't.
I know. So I didn't know how familiar you were with that concept, but student section, the males in the student section in particular can really just
the mullet is back.
Yeah. And sure, you would probably, for the Werners of the world, you would probably need to give out some mullet wigs.
Follically challenged. Yes, we need some help.
How great would that? It's really
kind of like that idea, though. You kind of like it.
I do. I did not think I would come on board with one of your ideas, but I did like that one. My only regret about the Altmaier mullet is he didn't start it like 6 weeks before he started it, because there was a shot on CBS. Again, wonderful production from CBS. But the helmet came off. There was a little wind. He was celebrating. I mean, that could have been really iconic if that mullet started like 6 weeks before. If we're just gonna pick and nitpick here, missed opportunity.
Luke Altmaier, like the weight of the world felt like it was on his shoulders at times last year, Joey, through that tough season. And you and I love talking with Luke. We've gotten to know him a little bit, and he's unbelievable with us, sharing his story and just the emotions, the ups and downs he's had. He's having so much fun. Like you could, the tongue out at the bottom of that pile after the touchdown. Like
there's a picture of him sneaking into the end zone, just staring down a Michigan defender. And then the Superman after he was run out of bounds.
Yeah.
I was not familiar with your trash talking game, Luke Altmaier, because you're right. He looks like he's having a blast, talking a little crap, doing it. It's fun to watch. It's fun to watch him throw the football, but to see him, I don't want to say find joy again, because that feels like some hot take artist, but to see him have this joy, you didn't see it all the time a year ago. It's been really fun to watch.
He did that Superman. I started singing Soldier Boy in the press conference or in the press box.
You were 26 when that came out?
Probably 1920 for sure. Oh,
I should have gone older just to really.
That was playing in the cafeteria at Phi Kappa Psi when we were having some parties back in the day.
What's your key? What was your biggest key?
Oh, my key. This is a cop out. You got to win the turnover margin by +2. It's to beat a team like this, to go on the road. It's what Illinois did in 2007 with, turnovers and takeaways. Like you got to be able to steal possessions from the better team. So it's stupid. It's simple. It's not stupid, but it's simple and it's cliche, but they have to win the turnover margin and continue what they did last week, because they just don't have the fun. Like they're good offense. I just don't know if they have the firepower to match with what Oregon has.
Yeah, and that's not exclusive to Illinois. Not a lot of teams are itching to get in an offensive shootout with the Oregon Ducks.
Yeah. All right, Illini picks to click versus number 1 Oregon. Last week, Joey, we didn't do so well.
No, you didn't.
I did not do well. I went bold though with mine. I went Colin Dixon and Torrey Cox Jr. Well, Michigan could not throw the ball, and Torrey barely played. And you went Zachary Franklin, drew some nice pass interferences, so you definitely won that over me. Dylan Rosiak, you definitely won that one. Great game for Dylan.
Yeah, that was you did go more bold. I would not have believed that us picking a wide receiver in that game would have completely fizzled out, which is again another way to hammer home and Illinois still won. Another way to hammer home how impressive Illinois was in the trenches and on the ground.
All right, I'll let you go first. I got a guy in mind, but I'll let you go first.
I'm going to stay on the topic of the pod to this point. It's Pat Bryant. I don't want to take Luke Altmaier. I feel weird taking the quarterback every week, especially when he's playing at the level that Luke Altmaier is. I'm not saying Pat Bryant's going to have some 150 yards, 3 touchdown games by any stretch of the imagination. That's a ton against a really good Oregon defense. But he was kind of quiet last week by design, not because he played poorly, because they didn't need to throw. And I just think he's too talented to have 2 weeks in a row where it's kind of a smaller output, even though Illinois got the win last week. And I just think this is as good of an opportunity as it is for Altmaier. Bryant can really continue to find his way up those boards, and maybe at some point get on the Blitnikoff watch list. They added 3 more guys today. There's 64 players on the watch list right now, and he's not one of them. Seems to me like it's not a hot take to call him one of the 64 best wide receivers in the country. I don't know. At this point, it does feel kind of odd that he's not in his 7 touchdowns, 3 away, have not found its way.
Yeah, given he'll probably be a top 15 drafted wide receiver, it would make sense for Pat Bryant to be on that list. Last week I tried to be cute. This week I've thought about Aiden Laufrey. Is this it?
Oh.
I'm going Zakari against zone coverage. I just think this is where he's set up to succeed and get to the sticks, get those first downs. I mean, he's had some really impressive ones. He had some really good ones against Michigan with moving the sticks there. So I'll go Zakari Franklin because Illinois is going to have to throw the ball. Defensively, I'll go first here, Joey. Been a little quiet recently. Did miss part of a game here recently, but Oregon's going to throw the ball a lot. They got a good slot receiver. They got good receivers. The corners, Caleb Patterson, Torrey Cox Jr. are going to need to be really good, but you need some big plays from Xavier Scott. So can you get a takeaway? Can you get a pick? Can you get a forced fumble? He's one of their best guys in run support. I think Xavier Scott's going to make an imprint on this game. It's been a little more quiet with him here recently, right? But he's a good football player, and I feel like he's ready for another big moment.
Yeah, I like that. My only concern is, as we mentioned, the way that Dylan Gabriel and Oregon protect the football. So in terms of a takeaway, but like PBUs, I think that could be sticky in coverage. I like that pick. I'm going to ride the hot hand here a little bit. You think I'm going Gabe, don't you?
I did. That's a hot hand.
Wrong.
You go nose tackle.
That easy. I really like the Oregon offensive line does not allow a ton of pressures. Like they're good at keeping.
You know who else doesn't? Dylan Gabriel. He gets rid of the ball really quickly.
Yeah. So that's what stopped me from going Gabe Backus. Matthew Bailey. I thought last week we said this on the post-game pod. I don't regret being as hyped up about Matthew Bailey coming into the season as I was. I think you look at his freshman year, you physically look at the guy, you see what he's done, you hear what people are saying about him. I do think we lost sight that there's a growth process for young players, young defensive backs, especially at a position that wears a lot. I think last week was a really big confidence week for Matthew Bailey. He's talked about just kind of struggling with knowing he was struggling and going through some of those growing pains. I think he's a guy they need playmakers in that strong safety position. You saw last week him force a fumble, pick off a pass. I think he's a guy who can keep riding that wave. I don't know what that looks like in my brain right now, but he's the team's leading tackler. Probably get a takeaway to make that click. I like where he's playing right now. I think he's starting to trend upward.
He and Dylan Rosier are going to be really important on Jordan James too, making sure they wrap up in space because, again, you're probably going to be more in space than you were against Michigan, right? With having to cover 3 wide receivers who are really, really good. So those guys got to be good in run support. All right, 45 minutes in. Joey's been waiting to get this out. He's had this idea. We both had the idea. I do want to say I texted it first. You
did, but I was thinking about it before you would text me. In fairness, now you did put it, but you did bring up the conversation between us first. Do you want me to start?
Yes, go for it. You've been itching for this one.
Jordan Anderson rushing touchdown.
Rushing.
Anytime touchdown for Jordan Anderson. That wishbone is intriguing. I'm with you. I don't assume anything Barry Lunny does is in a vacuum or any offensive coordinator. That wishbone is setting up for something. We only saw it for a couple plays, but he's doing something there. And I'm curious what it is. And Jordan Anderson's a guy who can catch the ball, as you mentioned, and a lot better than people probably give him credit for being a big running back. But I think there's a touchdown in the card. If there were ever a time to unleash the Jordan Anderson touchdown play, it's not quite Brandon Henderson at Nebraska levels of, whoa, all right. But this would probably be that moment.
This could have been a key is, a trick play. Like this is kind of, Illinois did against Michigan. You kind of hold them for these games where you think you might need them. But Jordan Anderson has gotten some reps. And, man, Barry's been in his bag in the red zone with some of these calls and getting it to the tight end, getting to the guy you least expect, whether it's Carson Goda or Tanner Arkin, whoever it is. Josh McCray got one.
Pat Bryant at fullback.
Yeah, like you saw the Pat Bryant at running back, right? Like they had a wrinkle to that last week with Josh McCray with the 5-yard run to the goal line. So everything kind of sets up for something else. And now you got me thinking, Joey. I was thinking, oh, do I go Illinois scores 3+ touchdowns? Because teams don't do that often against Oregon. Illinois gets 2+ takeaways. Those are kind of my things. I got a different one.
Ooh.
You and I have talked about this. They've been running that reverse to Pat Bryant the last 2 weeks to set up something. I'm going to Pat Bryant's going to throw the ball at some point in this game.
Yes.
We're going so bold.
Yes.
But this is the game. They've been setting it up, right? Like they had 2 against Purdue. They were decently successful. Last week it was not. But now you've put it on film 2 games in a row. They know your tendency. I don't know. I've never seen Pat Bryant throw the ball, but it feels like that's setting up for something bigger, right? So I'm just going to go with that. I'm just going to go with Pat Bryant with a throw.
Was it? I can't remember if it was the 2021 year with Tony Peterson or if it was Barry. Did Casey throw the ball
twice?
Was that under Barry?
Let me look that up. But Casey did have a couple.
I know Casey has thrown the ball. I just couldn't remember who the offensive coordinator. And the more I say it, the more I think it may have been in 2021 with Tony Peterson.
He had 2 attempts in 2021. He had 1 in 2019 as well.
All right, so there's not quite the apples to apples there, but I like that. I want to know who's on the other end of the catch. I want to go just burn it all with Luke Altmaier catching it, but I don't think that the way that play sets up, I don't think that
Walker
works
and McCray, that would be interesting.
Tanner
Arkin,
yeah, he feels like the answer for some of those.
Kind of blocks and then slips out. Yeah, tight end blocks and then slips out. If we're right, Illinois is going to hate us for this. By the way, if an Oregon coach thinks about this, they've been setting it up. They've been setting it up, and
I love that. This bold prediction segment has gone better than I could have even dreamed. I was pretty freaking excited about it coming into this. I did not have Pat Bryant pass on the bingo board.
Joey and I are leaving early Friday morning. Any final thoughts, Joey, before we head to Portland and then head to Eugene?
I did want to bring up one thing. We did put out a food recommendation list in Portland, so if you're compelled to share those with us, by all means. I want to bring up real quickly, Illinois is ranked 20. I don't see Illinois falling out with the loss at Oregon, but I always get I think twice about those when you're in that 20 range, because just weird stuff can knock you out. So I did look at the rest of below Illinois. Missouri is ranked number 21. And plays at Alabama.
Navy's at Navy against Notre Dame.
SMU is at Duke, Army, Air Force, Navy, Notre Dame, Vanderbilt, Texas. So I think it sets up below.
And let's be honest, this is the least amount of schools I've seen in the receiving votes. There just aren't many schools right now that are in the mix for receiving votes. Like Washington State, Syracuse had 15 points, UNLV had 5. Like usually these schools have like hundreds of points here. So it really is whittled down. So I agree with you. If they lose at Oregon, even if they lost by like 3 touchdowns, I think they stay in because their 2 losses beat a top 3 teams. So like I don't see that happening. It'd be really dumb if it did, but there's just not any deserving teams really outside of it that would leap over them, especially when I think Navy and Vandy are probably going to lose.
Yeah, I just get nervous when you start getting into that 20 range, and there's just a lot of variation. I'd feel better, even just 2 spots, though it might sound dumb. I'd feel better if Illinois would have been 18 this week about securing that. But I don't think they're going anywhere. It's just one of those things I thought of today. Like, could something happen? But
heck, if Illinois lost by 7, okay, in a good game, and Pitt lost to Syracuse, and say Boise State lost to UNLV, I think you can move up.
That's probably right.
The resume would say they should. Like they have one of the, I've seen like the resume things have them like 15 or 16. So I know the metrics aren't as high on them, but the actual just teams they've beat compared to other teams, like Illinois is deserving of where they are, and they will be after this week too.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think, just for the record, that they shouldn't go anywhere. I am looking up the Kansas schedule because I want to see if there's any Illinois hope for redemption of that, like to make that loss look better. I'm not saying it. Yeah, well, now it's 16 Kansas State, 10 Iowa State, 11 BYU, Colorado, Baylor. So,
well, they go on their little run here, Joey. Then all of a sudden they're
sure. Probably not a lot of hope for that Kansas win to look any better as this thing winds down this season. That's a tough that is a tough stretch for Lance Leipold in Kansas.
Tough look for their offensive coordinator, Jeff Grimes. That's for sure.
Or call him Jeremy Scott Frost.
All right. Thank you for listening to the Illini Inquirer Podcast. Give us a follow, rating, review, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe to us, and hit the notifications bell. Joey and I are heading out to Eugene. We will talk to you after the game for the post-game podcast. But until then, have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer Podcast.